Let's create a solid again. Apply Element 3D to it. Go to Scene Setup. Let's create a cube and work on it. Reduce the chamfer value that relates to these edges and press OK. Alright, here's our cube. Great. Next, let's have a look at all these settings. I think it won't take us much time since there is nothing difficult about them. Easy peasy. As I remember, when I was discovering Element 3D for myself, everything seemed so odd to me. All I saw was just lots of weird buttons and I had no clue what to do with them. However, I'm going to try and explain to you the way I understand it and the way maybe everyone understands it. Let's see. Group 1. So the cube belongs to Group 1. Here it is. Press OK and let's see what we can do with it. Let's start it not from the top but from the bottom. Why not? I think it might be more convenient. Here is the Group Utilities tab. Click on it, and here you can copy the group and paste it. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I don't use it, in fact. Here is the Create Group Null tab. Click on it, then click Create. As you can see, we have a null object created on the timeline. Now, when I rotate it, as you can see, our object rotates too. That is our group. Our object has been attached to the null object. So now we can easily animate the null object and place it anywhere. This is way more convenient than going into the parameters of Element 3D and animating it there. So here is a null. You can easily animate it here. What's next? Next, we can enable or disable it here. Then, here is Particle Replicator. So, particle count stands for the number of our object, that is how many times it will be duplicated. But you can't see it now and the point mode is turned on. So let's set it to 3D grid and see what happens. It works much the same as Cloner is Cinema 4D. There is the same 3D grid mode here. In fact, they both are identical. Then Shape Scale. If I increase this parameter, the distance between the objects will increase too. Let's probably rotate it. Let's make a small animation for Y so that we can see what's going on. Yeah, like this. Make it smoother. Let's reduce the number of cubes along the X and Y axis. Next, Scale. Scale X, Y, Z is the same scale as Shape Scale, but Shape Scale increases the size along all axes at once, while Scale itself just along one axis. The next is Rotation, that is the same rotation as of our null object. That's why remember to avoid animating objects here. Animate them by using a null object. But there are exceptions. When you need to animate one parameter, so you don't need to attach everything to a null object. So yes, there can be exceptions. Then we have shape options, which I have never used, so I have nothing to say about them. Next comes replicator effects, scatter and position noise. These parameters just add some randomness to your objects. As you can notice, you can adjust their values along any axis and the objects will move in the space. Then, there is position noise. If you increase this parameter, you can see your object's positions change. And during animation, they will move a bit like this. What's more, all these parameters can be adjusted as you want. That's it. This is how Particle Replicator works. Here you simply adjust the way your object is displayed. That is, you can select, let's say, sphere and increase position noise. As a result, you'll get such a sphere. But it's too big, so I'll go to Group Now and reduce scale. This way, I have reduced the scale of each object and reduce shape scale. And there is such a sphere created out of cubes. Let's move on and see what's next. And the next is particle look. Actually, the settings are a bit similar to those you could see in plugins like Particular, Form, and so on. Now let's focus on particle look. So particle size is just the size of your object. You can also see particle size here, the same. Next, there is a size random that makes a random scale of each object. Then, this is the scale which we attached to a null. So I won't change anything here. The next is particle rotation, allowing you to rotate all objects if they aren't oriented as you need them to be. Note that the sphere itself does not rotate. You see, it doesn't rotate this way, but each object rotates separately. So here, in particle look, you can adjust each part of an object separately, but not the whole object. Also, here is random rotation that brings randomness to the whole look and random rotation for each parameter. Randomize angle is the same, in fact, and rotation noise makes the objects rotate during the animation. Let's set it to 0. Color tint stands for the color of the object. Actually, I never use it. Let's set it to red. No, let's set this one. The next is opacity of each object. Then here is baked animation. Let's keep it for later. The next is multi-object, and we can enable it. What is this for? Here you can animate each object. Let's say we go to Scene Setup and have a few objects here. Let's say like this. Press OK. Let's also set replicator shape to point. Check Enable Multi-Object and here is our group made of these 3 objects, which can be animated separately. In a few words, multi-object provides an opportunity to animate objects independently of each other. That means they won't be as a whole object, but they will be animated as separate ones. Then, you can see a couple of settings that stand for the size, position, and rotation of objects. You can pull them, move them, and see what stands for what. But we'll move on. Let's enable this for now. Here is also such a cool thing as deform. Let me show you how it works. Create an object, this one, let's see, then enable wireframe in order to see what we do at all. Click Enable. I'll select this color and press OK. So here's our object. Let's scale it up. Now go down to Deform. By default, it's set to Enable. Here are a few settings like Taper, Twist, Bend, Noise, and Deform Offset. I usually use Twist and Noise. These are a few examples which I've applied these parameters to. Let's have a look at each of them. Let's start from the bottom again, from Noise. Enable it and increase intensity. When increasing it, you can see how our object is deforming in quite a random way. If you increase the scale parameter a bit, you can see how crazy our object deformation becomes. I remember that in order to make such a thing a few years ago, we needed to go to Cinema 4D, create several deformers, and animate it all in a complicated way. But now, we can do it all in After Effects with the help of this amazing plugin. By adjusting evolution, you can animate this effect. You can also play around with the scale and intensity settings. In the Advanced tab, you can set the minimum and maximum values for the noise parameters. As you can see, it won't go beyond these values. And always use evolution for animation. Before using noise, I recommend you increase the number of segments. But again, it depends on your animation and on what you want to make. I go into an object and increase the number of segments. Or I do it in Cinema 4D if it's an imported 3D object. So now increase intensity and scale. Now you can see that it already has rounded edges like that, so we can easily animate these things. And we already get some interesting animation. As you may notice, noise opens a kind of doors to creativity, so it's worth exploring on your own. Let's move on. Enable noise. Let's see what bend is for. Bend basically bends an object along one of the axes. Here you can change that axis. Now it is bent along the x-axis in this way. If we bend it along the y-axis, we'll get such a strange thing, a kind of an eye. Because it bends like this. It's Pac-Man. Bend direction is in fact rotation, and along the z-axis. But it doesn't relate to such objects, but to planar ones. The next is twist. By using twist, you can twist an object like this along different axes too. You can make such an infinite animation. Then twist along y, set it to 0, 0, 0, 0. It's the same along the z-axis, and you can create different animations. Also, here's taper that just spreads our object. That's it. That's all you can do. Actually, we've finished. We've dealt with these randoms too. Now let's focus on aux channels.